And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo, and we have a great show in store for you. Our guests, to my left, Dr. Dennis Liu, and to my further left, Yoni Miller. And we're going to talk about tomorrow's event. There's an emergency event tomorrow night on secrecy, on Guantanamo, what's happening there, Edward Snowden, Bradley Manning's trial. A lot of issues all to bring together at once. So we're going to really be telling you about this event, telling you where to go, how to get there, to become part of this. It's going to be very interesting. We just went over the lineup. I can't wait actually to go and to see this great lineup that folks have brought together, supporters. So, Dr. Liu, let me turn to you. Edward Snowden, traitor or hero?
Hero.
Why is that?
He's telling truth to the American people and to the world. He was in a position, as people who've been following the story know, to have access to what the NSA has been doing, which is in direct contradiction to what the NSA and Obama and the rest of the U.S. government has been saying for years about what they're doing. And so he came forward because he realized that he could no longer live with himself in the society that he sees being controlled in this way.
Okay.
The massive collection of all possible electronic communications by the government.
How about the arguments like today? It was the government had their say. It was said on all the news reports of the evening that 50 plots have been, this plan sucking up all this information, the metadata has stopped 50 terrorist plots.
Really? Now they're saying 50.
50, more than 50 some, or some.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Wow. Why is that interesting?
Well, originally when they came out after Snowden revealed this, they mentioned 1.
Yeah.
And now it's up to 50. There's been some inflation going on here.
Okay. So you don't take it, can we believe what the government is saying?
Well, let me put it this way. This is the same government that was denying that it was doing the things that they're now being forced to admit some of all these years. I mean, there's a number of reasons and dimensions to this that we will only have a little time to get into tonight. We're going to get into further tomorrow night.
Yes.
But let me point out a few of them.
Okay.
First of all, they say that Snowden and Bradley Manning are traitors for revealing this information to the American people and to the world, and that they're letting the enemy, Al-Qaeda and freelance terrorists, know things that they didn't know before.
Sure.
The Wall Street Journal wrote back in 2008 that as of 1998, Osama bin Laden had stopped using telephones because he knew, the whole organization knew that they were being tracked by the NSA and the CIA, and that none of those communications were secure.
Well, the argument, the counter to that, I would say, is from the beginning, folks have said, well, there's nothing new here. He didn't say anything. He went through all this trouble to release all these documents, Edward Snowden, to tell us what we already knew, what everybody in America knew.
Well, I and a few other people have been writing for years about the fact that our government has been engaging in warrantless, ubiquitous, massive surveillance over all of our communications. Now, it's one thing for intelligence experts or professors like me to say this. It's another thing for a person who is actually working in it and had his hands on it to come forward and document this, as Snowden has done.
Right.
So what those who are crying treason are upset about is not that the information has been disseminated to the quote-unquote enemy, because the enemy knew this all along.
Okay.
The other day I went on a Google search, and within 5 minutes I found out, if you go to NSA's own website, they have a thing, they talk about SIG intelligence, right? And they talk about how they're tracking the communications of those who want to hurt us. So, does that constitute treason that the NSA is bragging on its website that it's collecting information?
What is it that they're mad about with Edward Snowden and Bradley Manning if a lot of the information they've given it's not really top secret and it's in the public domain, a lot of it?
Well, they're upset that, you see, most of the American people did not know until now, and they're still many of them are still trying to are still not apprised of the whole story, which is one of the reasons we want people to come tomorrow night, because it'd be hard to overstate the significance of this moment. Because what the government is doing, I mean, most Americans didn't know that every communication of theirs was being tracked. They didn't know that. Many of them still don't know this. But a majority of them, according to the latest polls, are opposed to it. And especially in the younger demographic, consider Snowden a hero for doing this. So what the government is trying to do is criminalize dissent. And some people say, well, I have nothing to hide. I'm not concerned. If it's really going to stop terrorism, then I don't have a problem with it. Right. What these people are missing is that if the government can get away with collecting all of this information on all of us, and foreign governments as well, and foreign citizens as well, which is what they're doing. The British got caught the other day, right? This is one of the things Snowden revealed that was not known, was that British intelligence, the NSA equivalent, called GCHQ, was spying on the G8. Every single communication that we're doing.
Is that why President Putin had such he had a sour look on his face
well,
today
he tends to
and
have
yesterday.
A sour look face
Anyway, that's what people were saying. It might not be
know.
this in particular. And there's a lot of problems in the world, but I don't think being listened into is probably something people want to wake up to and read in the newspaper.
They don't. And so anyway, so what people who say I don't have anything to hide are missing is that if the government can amass all of this data, they can use it against anyone who dares to speak up and dissent. And what do governments tend to do historically? We know that governments don't tend to like it when somebody challenges their policies, and they will find ways, even if it's just out of egocentrism, in the most, or stubbornness in the most minimal, innocuous forms of, the expression of this kind of arrogance of power, to suppress those people who disagree with them. So what's at stake here is not mainly privacy, although privacy is obviously at stake here. Mainly what's at stake here is the use of the government to abuse and make impossible anyone to speak out against it.
Okay, let me take this this moment to tell us about the event. To ask you to tell us about the event.
Yeah, so it's tomorrow night, Wednesday, at the Cooper Union in the Great Hall.
What's the name of it?
We are calling it, well, our slogan, it's an emergency meeting, no government spying on whole populations, hands off Snowden and Manning, close Guantanamo now. Okay. Those are sort of the titles for the program.
Sure.
But we, as I was saying a moment ago, consider this an extraordinarily important moment. And that what Snowden and Bradley Manning did, Manning, when he did this, had a similar motivation to Snowden, which was, I'm learning these things that people need to find out about. The American people, the world needs to learn what's going on.
And this is going to be at the Cooper Union.
The Cooper Union in the Great Hall. Doors open at 7 o'clock. We have the program will actually start at 7:30, but we will have things that are, we have videos, we have a couple of performance pieces. Ray McGovern is going to be speaking, the former CIA analyst.
Brad S. is going to be Brad S. 87, right? Brad S. 87.
Part of that's going to be performed.
Right. Or Claire Leibowitz, who was on the show 2 weeks ago. So her play, for folks who were here when Claire was here, who were listening when Claire was here, if you want to see it, go to this event at Cooper Union tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Cooper Union, the number 6 train, IRT 6, Astor Place, stops right there. The R train is on 8th Street. You can come down to Union Square and walk a few blocks. The F train down to Houston Street, 2nd Avenue. Those are all areas. 4th Street, stop, A train, all within walking distance of Cooper Union, which is at like 6th and 7th Street and 3rd Avenue and what they used to call 4th Avenue, right? I don't know what they call it now. But so that's tomorrow at 7. Great. We're going to tell people more about that later on. Who are some of the guests?
National Lawyers Guild, Heidi Bogosian.
Another guest on the show.
Right. I mentioned Ray McGovern. Mike Daisy is doing a monologue.
Okay.
Aladdin, the performance artist, is going to do a thing on the hunger strikers. Andy Z of Revolution Books will be speaking. Deborah Sweet will be co-emceeing with me, and I'm going to be addressing various aspects of this story. We're trying to get Glenn Greenwald on Skype.
Okay.
We may or may not.
The reporter from The Guardian who broke the story.
Exactly.
Okay. Exactly. All right. Good. Let me bring in Yoni Miller. Okay. First time on the show, but I know we've been on WBAI together a few times. And Yoni, you're an Occupy Wall Street person. You've been involved in this. I met you in Charlotte. You've been involved in this for a while now. What can you tell us? What insights can you give us as sort of a young person and a person who knows a lot about computers and things like that? What do you think about what's going on, privacy and all of this? How does that relate to the youth of America?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any coincidence that people in the younger age gap are much more supportive of Snowden, and it's, I think, out of personal interest. We are from the digital era. We're using email, Facebook, Gmail, and all these other services that are currently being commodified for private purposes and private profits. And so what we see here with Snowden is we're seeing a lot of information that's being put into the public domain, similar to Bradley Manning. And in terms of computer security, there's so many different angles to go at it. A lot of these things that have been going on since the Bush era, but Obama has institutionalized and legalized and now even defended these policies. And so previously, the American Civil Liberties Union, they were not able to even challenge these in court. We weren't able to have that conversation. And now that it's out there, that this is happening, they're able to at least challenge it and determine its constitutionality. And Jacob Appelbaum, who's one of the creators of Tor and very active in the Occupy Wall Street movement, he has done extensive interviews about the limitations, architecturally speaking, as well as legally speaking, about the current system here in terms of security. And in the response to the thing about terrorism, I mean, the biggest thought that comes to mind is maybe terrorism is not the biggest problem right now in this country. What steps the government are taking and the military policies that we have. Aside from the moral costs and the amount of lives lost, we're costing trillions of dollars. And this is all to prevent, quote, alleged individual cases of terrorism. And currently the police that we have here, they kill more people than terrorists right now. And so what are the problems here? And we need to get that perspective back there.
Okay, right. Okay, interesting. So, there's a lot there, and it was interesting what you said earlier, that this is about dissent and not about privacy, in your opinion. That this
it's both, but I would say it's more about dissent than it is about privacy. People make a mistake if they think this is mainly or exclusively about privacy, because it's not. I mean, the Fourth Amendment, see, one of the things about this ubiquitous warrantless surveillance is everyone's being treated as a suspect.
Sure.
And this language, I've been writing about this for a number of years. I talk about it in my Globalization and the Demolition of Society book.
Right. Tell me about your books. I'd like to hear about them, but after this, go ahead.
Sure. So anyway, this terminology that everyone is a suspect, everyone is a target, is being used by these fusion center people, for example, who believe that if we could have total information, that they could prevent these incidents from happening. Matthew Aid, who is a person who's an intelligence expert, he's written about it. He was quoted in the New York Times a few years ago about this, when this story was, during the Bush regime. And he pointed out, it was after the Nigerian Briefs bomber incident on Christmas Day, right?
Sure.
And he commented in a 2009 story in the New York Times that the amount of data that's being brought in by NSA is every day, is 4 times the amount of information contained in the Library of Congress. 4 times, and that was 2009. They're bringing in even more data now. So one of the points I'd like to make about this is that intelligence is drowning in data. Right? Do you remember the statement that Dick Cheney made back when they were preparing to invade Iraq, and Ron Suskind of the New York Times wrote a book about it called The 1% Doctrine?
Okay.
Cheney said, if there's a 1% chance of something happening, we have to treat it as a certainty. So he is actually, when Cheney said this, he was actually articulating the premise of this total information network idea. Now imagine if you were a detective trying to solve a crime. And instead of trying to go for the more likely suspects and investigating the facts of the case and looking for evidence, you treated everybody in the whole city as a suspect, right? Not only the whole city, but the whole state. Not only the whole state, but the whole country. Not only the whole country, but the whole world. What detective would operate this way? This is what our government is doing. It actually is counterproductive. Because if you're collecting all of this information, it obscures the actual plots that ostensibly you're trying to identify. It makes it harder for you to collect information, actually identify.
So what in your opinion is, go ahead.
I mean, and this kind of rationale didn't happen overnight. When we first justified it, that it was okay with enemy, male age combatants overseas, and by combatants they just mean anyone, any males within a strike zone. Then it expanded to non-citizens, and now that we realize it's including citizens, treading into the waters of preemptive prosecution, prosecuting people before they actually commit the crimes, thought crimes.
It's like the Minority Report, right? What we're doing, what Obama has been doing, and he said this in his speech most recently, he said it before in his speech in 2009. He said, I will hold people in detention even if we have exhausted all means for prosecution, meaning, or the evidence is tainted, meaning, i.e. we tortured them, right, to get the evidence. So we can't release them. And we're holding people, in other words, on the basis of what they might do as opposed to what they have done. That's preventive detention. That's the Minority Report, right? So this is part of these policies that I write about in Globalization and the Demolition of Society. It started in the late 1970s in Europe. It's called public order policies. And they're designed to, they treat everybody as a suspect. They collect massive amounts of information as a means of exercising social control. Because they're trying to prevent, and what's the underlying rationale for this? The underlying rationale for that is that our society, the Occupy movement, very clearly identified this as the 1%ers versus the 99%. We are expanding the inequality in the society, relentlessly. And as you do that, you cannot continue to go on that path and attack people's living standards and so on without people being questioning it, without people wanting to rebel against it. And so they have to clamp down on the population and criminalize truth tellers and dissent in order to continue to do this. So that's my answer to your earlier question, which is what is the reason why they're doing this?
Okay. So also you're talking about Guantanamo in this event. And let's tell folks when the event is again. It's going to be at Cooper Union tomorrow,
Tomorrow
7
night,
o'clock.
Wednesday, 7 p.m. The program doors open at 7. The Great Hall, no one will be turned away. It's open. It's free. We will be asking donations, but no one will be turned away. So we hold up to that whole hall holds up to 900 people. So
and there will be live streams, and if people want to go onto Twitter, hashtag J19J19, people can find the links. They can find more information, ask us for requests and such. We want as many people to participate.
That's Occupy Talk, like June 19, J19.
You want to repeat that? Yeah.
Right.
Can you repeat that?
#J19, right?
Hashtag J19.
Hashtag, what did I call it? /tag? It's hashtag.
Hashtag.
Hashtag J19 on Twitter, so you can find the link to then watch it on live stream, which is a people's television broadcasting system, basically. Excellent. So, but come down if you can jump on a subway, come on down and actually sit and meet everybody and become part. I guess, as an organizing tool, right? Okay, Guantanamo. That's one of the things we haven't talked about it that much. There's still numbers of people who are held in Guantanamo. Numbers of them.
It's over 130 days at this point for the hunger strikers.
And how is that going? I mean, are they force feeding people?
They're force feeding people. Which is torture itself. It's against medical ethics to force feed people this way. And, as a result of the hunger strike, as you know, on May 23rd, Obama made a speech in which he said, he hadn't talked for years about Guantanamo. And then because of the hunger strike, he was forced to address the question again. And he said, I do want to close Guantanamo, but Congress is stopping me from doing it. And on the same day he gave that speech, we took out a full-page ad in the New York Times. It says, close Guantanamo now. And it was signed by, major notable figures in all walks of life. Cornel West, Michael Moore, Oliver Stone, John Cusack, and so on. Pointing out that, first of all, that Guantanamo, Obama could close it, he doesn't need Congress, and that he has actually taken steps to prevent it from being closed, which people don't know too much about.
What's the story with Obama? I was listening to a radio commentator who's usually very with it, but who said that they felt that because he was African American, he wasn't getting the respect that other presidents would have gotten on this issue.
What did he mean by respect?
She. I guess the respect as president that past presidents have received.
And what did she mean in relation to Guantanamo and its closure?
Not so much Guantanamo, but to talk about Snowden's release. That this was that other presidents. Only when a black president happens do they get knocked down like this.
I mean, I disagree with that. You know, there are clear empirical numbers that show the difference between Obama, even Bush, and just those two. You have all these different post 9/11 changes, but with Obama, we're seeing a much higher number of incarceration rates. We're seeing more than all the previous presidential administrations combined. Prosecution of whistleblowers, giving espionage act, aiding the enemy, and these are really heinous charges. That's like the highest charges of treason in this country.
Yeah, I think that argument that you're citing there is really an illegitimate one. Basically, it's designed to cover over what Obama really... I mean, here's the thing. Obama came forward as the candidate for the Democratic Party to essentially rescue the system because it was in such danger of being, people were so angry about Bush and Cheney. And so they saw this black man who could talk, could be articulate, and looked really different from them, and said things that made it sound like he, hope and change, and I'm going to close Guantanamo. I taught constitutional law. I'm going to restore habeas corpus, and indefinite detention. I'm going to end it, and so on, and close Guantanamo, and he made all these promises, and people bought the image. Many people bought the image, and they weren't looking closely at what he's actually saying. If you look closely at what the man is actually saying, what he'll do is he will throw in certain words like transparency and the rule of law. And he throws those in to make it look like the package is very pretty, but in fact, when you look at the essence of what he's arguing for, he's arguing for the very opposite of what he superficially appears to be calling for. So I think that around Guantanamo and now around the Snowden revelations, that the way I wrote about this recently was I said it's like you take a rubber band and you stretch it and you stretch it and you stretch it, and you're starting to hear the gap between the statements, how they sound, and what he's actually doing. Some of those they're being stretched to the breaking point, and you can hear the whipping sound of the bands breaking. So I think that this is he was on Charlie Rose last night, and I didn't actually see the show, but I was talking to people who did, and they said he looked like he looked extremely uncomfortable trying to and they're lying now about. See, he said metadata. We're only collecting metadata. And
what is metadata? Let me ask the technology person
so
here.
Metadata would be, the physical equivalent. It would be not the content of your communications, but everything around it. Who you talk to, where you talk to. So, physically speaking, it would be, which house you went to, what time you left that house, and so on. And the other thing I would add is, while it is pretty damning to be looking at the actual content itself, metadata in itself can be implicating in many ways worse than the content itself. If you're looking at whistleblowers and congressmen and certain media outlets that are speaking, you can connect the dots there and preemptively prosecute those people, and that says a lot more about you than that bad phone call you had on a bad day or so.
Well, I think it was Snowden who, during his interview recently, mentioned that the distinction between what he called policy and technology. What do they mean by that? I don't know if you heard that. What does he mean by technology versus policy?
I think you have two different laws. You have the laws of the nature and you have the laws of the state. And so there's currently NSA in theory has certain types of regulations. Many of them we turn out are a lot weaker than we expected. But even beyond those, Snowden himself could have done a lot of stuff. He could have also done malfeasance. He could have given the secrets to Russia or China. And we shouldn't have that kind of trust or that kind of structure where we could have so much trust in such a small amount of people with such little accountability. And by the laws of nature, I mean, as a pirate, as a crypto-anarchist, this is really exciting to me because the state derives its legitimacy from violence and the threats of violence. And a quote from Assange is, no amount of violence can solve a math problem. And so with cryptography, I mean, that's a means of achieving privacy.
That's the reality, I see. Very good. Very good. We have a few more minutes. Want to tell us again about the event?
Yeah, tomorrow night at the Cooper Union's Great Hall, 7 o'clock. Program starts at 7:30, doors open at 7. You should be there. Come. If you can't make it for some reason, it'll be live streamed. There's a couple things, if I can throw in there,
Sure,
we didn't
go
get
ahead.
to mention here. First of all, this massive surveillance started 7 months before 9/11. The rationale is that it was 9/11 and the war on terror since then, but they actually started it. The NSA had a plan to tap into all of the electronic communications as soon as Bush took office.
Okay.
And that is, they implemented in February of 2001. Secondly, they are listening in on content, metadata by
definitely,
itself.
yeah.
If that were true, that would be damning enough. But they're in fact lying now about what they're listening in on, that they've been listening in on content. And so those are
People who are not committing any crime, but just because they want to know what's going on with them.
they want to use it for social control against the people. And so they are isolating themselves more and more. Authorities are isolating themselves more and more from the people. And you have these like circuses of, misrepresentations and attacking science and truth. And
Where's this heading?
is what's at stake.
What do you think, in your opinion, this is heading? Where are we going from this if it continues on this path?
Well, if they
These
can get away,
revelations,
if they
more
can
and
get,
more is coming up.
if they can get away with this, you have a tyranny, right? There's no question. In 2009, the DoD was training all of its employees that protest
Sure.
was low-level terrorism. That's a quote. Low-level terrorism is what all of the DoD was being trained was
Right.
protest.
And the NYPD was Koch's personal army, as I remember he said.
So this is what is at stake, and it's not something way down the road.
Right.
This is really what's being fought of. This issue is so important, we can't afford to lose on this question.
Okay.
I mean, even on a local level, right now we're seeing with Massachusetts legislative branch, they want to change the wiretapping policies of the police there so that not only can they tap in mobs, which is the laws from the 1900s, but they can also tap in anyone that they think is committing a crime, including, unlawful possession of marijuana or something.
Okay, we don't have much time, but how about FISA, all the FISA court, all these regulations, all this supervision that's supposed to be going on? I mean, they were talking about
that's another thing that they're lying about. Senator Ron Wyden, gave a speech before the Congress in December of last year, in which he said, the FISA does not look at whether the NSA essentially, make this quick. NSA can listen in. There's no restrictions on content for them to do. They're not even being examined by FISA regarding that.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis Liu, Yoni Miller, for joining us on Let Them Talk. We had a very interesting show, very informative, and definitely look forward to tomorrow's event, which is going to be at Cooper Union at 7 p.m. Hope to see you all there. Thanks a lot for joining us on Let Them Talk. And again, take the train. You can get off at the number 6, Astor Place. It's right there. Or the R train gets off at 8th Street, and you can walk over from Broadway, and 7 o'clock doors open, right?
Right.
And do you have a website?
Worldcan'twait.net.
Worldcan'twait.net. Thank you. See you next week.